Please welcome to the stage, Hayes Drumwrigt, CEO of Trace3.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 2013 Trace3 EBC. This is the biggest production we do every single year, and I don't think we're going to let you down this year. We have a plan for you guys over the next 2 days that is nothing short of amazing. I think most of you know we write these playbooks every single year, and we were going to hand these out when you came in, but the problem is if I was to hand these out when you came in, it would totally ruin my speech, because I'm pretty much talking a lot about what I wrote in these playbooks. So if you have interest in getting one, these are for the vendors, they are for the clients. You guys can absolutely take one of these. They will be outside in one of the breaks, and you can go grab them. In fact, many of the speakers that are speaking at the event have written books, and those books, after they speak, will be outside. So if you're interested, you can grab one. So I've talked about it before, but writing these books, it's difficult. It takes a lot of thought, because when we put them out, we know they need to stand the test of time. They need to stand up over 6 or 7 years, because when we recruit employees, we often will give them the playbooks, and they'll read the playbooks to decide whether they're a cultural fit. And writing the book this year, there's something really important that I wanted to convey to the company. And writing the book was something that I usually spend 2 to 3 months thinking about before I ever write a word of it. So I was driving into work, and I was listening to Simon & Garfunkel. How many of you guys like Simon & Garfunkel? So I was listening to this, and I've probably been listening to them since before college, so over 20 years. And I was listening to this song called The Boxer, if you're familiar with that song. And I was listening to it, and I was kind of thinking about the playbook, and that last verse of the song, here it is. The last verse of the song, in the clearing stands a boxer and a fighter by his trade, and he carries the reminders of every glove that laid him down or cut him till he cried out in his anger and his shame, I am leaving, but the fighter still remains. And I was thinking and thinking, and then in the song he'll say, and cut him, and they say it kind of sharply, and it kind of brought me out of what I was thinking about. And then I listened to the last 2 lines, and I literally wanted to pull the car over. I wanted to pull the car over, and I wanted to start writing the playbook immediately, because all of a sudden when I heard that verse, I kind of knew the way that I could explain it to everyone that would make what I wanted to write about make sense. So when I was sitting in the car and I was listening to it, it brought back this memory for me, and it's a little bit of a story, but I think it's important that you understand kind of where we came from so that you can understand how this all plays out. I don't know how many of you know this, but I had a company before this called TechFuel. And at TechFuel, it was a pretty fun time. I had grown up in the industry. I had become a sales rep. I had been decently successful at a young age. And I decided that I would go off and I would start TechFuel with a couple other people that are still part of this company. And we really just went after the market as quickly as we could. How many of you were selling in the late 90s or part of the industry in the late 90s? In the late 90s, everybody was buying everything. Like if you could call somebody and say, hey, I do infrastructure, or I do technology, there were so many startups, it was so easy to sell. And we very quickly, over the first 2 years of business, grew to over 20 million in sales. And we were selling products that did really well with the .com space. And we were really focused pretty heavily on the .coms. And the reason being was they were the ones that were buying everything. It was kind of cool because even at that time, when you sold to brick and mortar, which was what they called it back then, right? Kind of funny to think of that, but they called it brick and mortar. It was so much more difficult because they had so many sunk costs and they already had so much gear. When you sold to a .com, they didn't have anything. Like we were partnered kind of with Idea Labs, if you remember that company, and they were throwing out Stamps.com and all these different companies. And we would actually sell a rack of gear that had the storage, the server, the database, the network, the firewall, the load balancer. It had all of it in it. And we would just ship them like a company in a box, and we would just send it to them. And we didn't give it a ton of thought. That was the easy way to sell. That was the way that we were making a lot of money, so we were just cranking it out. After a while, those clients came to us and they said, you know what would be cool is if you built a little portal on top of this company in a box, then I would just be able to focus on what my business needs me to do. In fact, College Club was one of our largest clients. They just wanted to build these college communities. They didn't necessarily want to be specialists in technology. So I went out and I raised money from angels and VCs, and we raised about $7 million. And we were kind of super high on ourselves at that time. because we were raising money. We were worth a lot of money. We thought, really, my main goal out of college and everything, I wanted to start a company and I wanted to go public. That's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to have an IPO. So we started doing this software play. We continued doing some of the resale stuff. And I vividly remember going to a Chargers game with the CEO and one of the VPs at College Club and my sales rep. And we were at the game. And I'm sitting next to the CEO, and he says, hey, this is going to be terrific. You guys have helped us so much. We just bought $7 million from you. I know we only paid about $5.5 million of the invoice, but we're going public next week. And my CFO at the time, this guy, Adriel Lars, was a banker at Morgan Stanley for a while who was taking him public, and then he became the CFO of TechFuel. And he double-checked it. Everything was clean. They really were. And he said, what's great is after we go public, we're going to buy about $20 million from you guys because we're building out 2 or 3 data centers. And I have a company that's $23 million in sales. I'm like, yeah, king of the world, right? So this is going to be terrific. The Monday after the game, the market crashed. And then 2 days later, they pulled the IPO. And 1 month later, College Club was bankrupt. So now I'm sitting on a bad receivable of $1.5 million. I've raised this money from the VCs and the angels, but they won't allow me to use the money to pay off that debt. They are only interested in the software play. So now I'm walking that fine line of watching all of my clients start to go bankrupt because the dot-com space died. And I did not think at the time that I should be looking at spreading across multiple verticals and trying to be safe. I was just thinking about speed, getting to market as quick as I could, and hitting the ramp and going for the IPO. So you fast forward about 6 months of really tough times, not just for me, but for all these companies that we sold to that are shutting down. And I go home, and I sit on the bed in my room, and I get pretty upset, and I start crying. And my wife comes in, and my wife Jen, she comes in, and she's like, what's going on? And she kind of was aware of how difficult things in the market were. And I said, honey, I'm losing everything. Like, I'm losing the whole company. Like, we're going to have to shut it down. All of our clients are going bankrupt. The product that we're building is great, but we don't have anyone to sell it to anymore. And I got horrible news today. I just found out on a lot of the stuff that we signed in the very early days of the company that we had personal guarantees. Adriel and Brett and myself, we had personal guarantees on most of the leases. When it was 1 or 2 things on the lease, it wasn't that big of a deal, but now there's hundreds of items on the Dell lease, hundreds of items on other leases, and we owe like $700,000 or $800,000 to people, and we have personal guarantees, so the bankruptcy won't save us from that. And she's rubbing my back, and she's like, it's going to be okay. We'll figure it out. And you have to know a little bit about my wife. This was my first year of marriage. We'd only been married like 8 months, but I had known her since high school. And Jen is a saver. Like, she saves money relentlessly. It's one of the things I love about her. Like, everybody's like, oh, does your wife spend a lot of money? No, I spend a lot of money. My wife doesn't spend any money. It's totally awesome. And she is, like, at 16, 17 years old, she already had probably $10,000 or $15,000 saved, and it was a big deal to her to be self-reliant. Her parents had taught her well with that, and she had done a terrific job. And she was working at B of A, and she was a VP there. She had a great job, and she had saved a bunch of money. And she's like, hey, it's going to be okay. And I started crying hard. I was like, I had to let go of my brother today. I'm having to let go of people that are like my best friends, all the people that were at our wedding. I had 70, 100 people I was in charge of, and I've let them all down. I lost all this money for all these people. I feel horrible. And she's like, it's going to be all right. And she's rubbing my back. I was like, Jen, we're married now. I lost all of your money too. And she took her hand off my back, and she put her hands in her lap, and then she started crying. And it was literally, no kid, because there was no amount of money she could make. That we only had like $100K saved. We didn't take any money. We were going for the IPO. So it was a true moment of despair for me. I was in one of the worst moments of my life where I had let everybody down that was important to me, and I really had a choice. And it comes back to this song. If you can put that back up, you have a choice in moments like this of how you can look at it. When you think about the boxer and the fighter, right? The boxer for me was like all my training. I had been trained as a rep. I'd been watched, NetApp go from 30 to 90 every year and do a 3-for-1 split. I watched people invest in Yahoo and become millionaires overnight. I wanted to be a part of what was happening there. I had been trained to go and follow what was happening in the market and just be a part of it, and I was going as fast as I could. And you could argue that that was kind of the Boxer mentality, that I was just doing what I was taught. It was not my fault that TechFuel went under. Market conditions beyond my control shut that company down. How was I supposed to know that the dot-com thing would be a bust? If I had started the portal software thing back 2 or 3 years older, if I was just a little bit older, had started it 2 or 3 years before the bust, I probably would have gone public and been one of those success stories you read about. One of those guys in their 20s that just did something magical that nobody understands, including himself. And it just wasn't fair, right? I mean, and I had that feeling deep down, like it's just not fair. I just missed the window by like 2 years. I don't understand why this is happening to me. That's one way you could look at it. But, when I started in the industry as a sales rep, you start kind of as a sponge, right? And you start, and you don't really know anything. If you can think back to the first job you had in IT, you really were just going out there and you were trying to learn the most you could and be the best you could. And I think of that kind of as the fighter. The fighter is somebody that's just the core of you. It's the core of you, and it's the person that's willing to learn at all times. The boxer is the person that once you've learned all these things and you're applying them, they should just continue to work. But when you're in desperation, every glove that laid him down or cut him till he cried out, all the layoffs, all the people that I had to let go, all the people that I had lost money for, I felt like I just wanted to run away. That's what I really felt like. But when I sat on that bed and I had that moment, I realized, you know what? This is my fault. This is 100% my fault. I was the CEO of this company. It was my job to be looking at market risks, to be protecting the families that worked for me. I was supposed to be the one that was smart with my head above the trees, looking out and seeing what was going to be happening and making sure that TechFuel would be okay. And I didn't do a good job of that. So the boxer for me really did run away. He wanted to blame everybody else, but when I really came down to it, the fighter is what remained. And I realized that to look at the world and blame the world for my problems was the wrong thing to do. You have to take responsibility for this type of stuff. You can't be a victim in these situations. So a year later, I decided that we would begin again, and we started Trace3. But I did it much differently this time. I wanted to be the kind of CEO that would be much smarter. I wanted to be much more intelligent about how I went to market. So we started the company with only $100. We knew that if we had a good plan, our clients would come to us and we would be able to build a strong business. We didn't need to put millions of dollars in it to start it, and we were correct. I've talked before about this relevance versus autonomy. We didn't want to start a business where we just had an IPO and the founders got rich. We wanted to be relevant to the marketplace. That was super important. I wanted to sell to more than one vertical. In this room today, we probably have 15 verticals of industry, automotive, media, you name it. We probably pharmaceutical. We've got it in the room today because that was the plan from the beginning. I had been ruined by not thinking about that, by only going to one vertical. So we were much smarter about that. We wanted to grow to a size that we could defend our region. When you start $100, no revenue, we got to 100 million very fast, and then in 2 years we got to 300 million. And we weren't doing that because we felt that those were numbers we had to hit. We wanted to be relevant on a national scale to our partners and to our clients. These were all to plan. I understood that the only intrinsic value at Trace3 is the people. We don't make anything. So instead of just hiring anybody that could pick up a phone, as I did with my previous company, I had a people plan that was serious. We went after the best people in the market, people that could handle a downturn. In fact, I specifically in the beginning went after people that did very well in the downturn because I knew that they could get us through any kind of a situation. We also, as I talked about last year, had a focus on foundational success. So foundational success for us is focusing on all 3 clients, which I represent in those circles. And you can make decisions at any time that work for 1 or 2 of those clients. But if you want to really have organic growth in a business, especially a business that you really haven't funded with any money, then you've got to focus just on that small little section in the middle. That's what equals foundational success. DirecTV is going to be getting up and talking. Mike Benson, the CIO there, we're super thankful that he's coming out and speaking. But we've had that kind of success with him. Success that worked for him, worked for our partners, and worked for Trace3. And those are the kind of successes that you can build skyscrapers off. They are foundational to the business. I don't want to have to hide how much margin we made. I don't want to do something that works for a partner but doesn't work for a client. So we've had a huge focus on that, and that's how we've gone from $100 to $320 million in 10 years. And it's worked very well, and I'm very sure of it. Because we have situations where new people come and they want to maybe just on this one solution we could do something that doesn't work for all three. Well, look, we have to stand the test of time. Trace3 is not going anywhere. We have a plan, right? And our brand is everything. So by focusing on that center, it really has worked for us. And here's the results. We get fastest growing company all the time. We get that all over the place. It gets a little harder as the numbers get bigger, but we still have done pretty well. I won the Entrepreneur of the Year award for E&Y. How many of you have heard of that? So I was stoked on that one because I had wanted that one since college. I had no idea that they were totally messing with me on that. So when you win that award, here's what they come in, they video you, you show them your financials, you do all of this stuff, and they get total access to everything. And then after you win it, they cold call you relentlessly, and like every partner keeps calling you, and all they really wanted was me as a client. I had no idea. I thought I was a really good entrepreneur, but it turns out it's just a gimmick. So thank you, E&Y, if you watch this. I was very thankful, but I didn't really get it. I think the one I'm probably the most proud of is from the Business Journal and the Orange County Register. We've gotten top place to work a couple of times, and that one's kind of neat. But as it turns out, for where we're headed, none of that really necessarily matters, and I'll get to that in a minute. None of those awards. We didn't start the company wanting to win awards. They're nice, but they can mislead you. They can kind of build up your ego and make you think once again that you're really smart and everything that you've learned is the right way to do it, and maybe you stop challenging yourself. Because look at my trophy case. Look at how smart I am. TechFuel made good money too. TechFuel won a couple awards. That didn't save us from anything. So when we started the business, when you start anything, you kind of have to start in a niche, right? You kind of got to pick what you're going to go with, and you're going to have to be really good at that. And we picked best-of-breed products in storage and networking, and we stuck with that. And that was a good way to get going. It gave the clients a lot of clarity at what we were good at. We then, after 2 or 3 years, moved forward into storage. We expanded a little bit on storage, and then we added security and virtualization because that's where the market was headed. And then we did new technology, and new technology is something you're going to hear a lot about at the event today and the next couple days. How many people from Riverbed are in the room? So we found Riverbed like right after their B round of funding, and we realized that you couldn't, as a new company, go in and ask clients to give up a sunk cost of $7 million on storage or on something like that. You had to go in and you had to offer them something that got them closer to the business and allowed them to do more with less. And it would be great if it allowed it to leverage a sunk cost so that you could do so much more with it that you'd look great with the CFO. Riverbed was the first product like that we found. After that, it was Data Domain, it was Isilon, it was Palo Alto Networks. And you'll see, you're going to see a slew of them today. And we got very good at finding those. And then we found that kind of completing the story and getting higher up the stack and not just talking about infrastructure, but talking about solutions started to work much better in the marketplace. And we had a broad enough portfolio of products that we could do that. It was right around this time that I had a company call and ask if they could buy Trace3. And this was an interesting moment for me because I had never really considered selling Trace3. I still haven't considered selling Trace3. But here's what I knew. I could no longer just go into the market as I did as the boxer at TechFuel and not think of a backup plan. I had lost 100 people. I had given up their incomes. I had helped them lose their job by not being responsible. So it was important to me to at least entertain the idea of going and finding out what these guys wanted and educating myself on how that would work so that if a disaster did strike again, I would be ready. I felt that was my job as CEO. So I flew out to Minnesota to talk with this company. And I went in there, and we were probably 40 or 50 million in sales at the time. And I went into that meeting, and I got to their boardroom, And at the time, like, there was no middle management at Trace3. Like, I was still selling. I still carried a bag. In fact, I had cards. Quicksilver was super pissed off at me because 3 years into me selling to them, they realized I was the CEO, and then they thought I could have gotten better pricing the whole time. Because I had, like, all these different cards. I was the original CFO. I was the original sales rep. I was the original janitor. I had everything. And so I went out there, and I sit down, and it's got the CEO, I think a president, and the CFO, and then like 7 VPs, and I'm like, oh man, this is gonna be exhausting. Like, how many people does it take to manage a $300 million company, which is about the size they were at? And we started talking through the way they were doing it. They were mainly a storage player. They had a good service and maintenance business. And I was telling them about, I probably said way too much, but I was telling them about what we were doing with new tech and how new tech was keeping us really relevant in the marketplace. It was a great access point to get new accounts. And it was very clear to me with the kind of people I was going after and the kind of people they were going after that the two companies would never work. But it was great because I didn't want to go out and sell the company. I wanted to understand how some of these larger companies were running, and I wanted to understand why they weren't growing. They had been at like 300 million for like 2 or 3 years. They were stuck, and I don't like being stuck. So it was kind of a research mission for me. I got what I needed to know. I really liked the CEO of the company. I had met him at a couple partner councils, and he was a really good guy. And he walked downstairs with me and walked me to the parking lot. And one of the final things that happened, they're like, well, Hayes, if you don't join us, what are you going to do? And I kind of felt bad later that I said this because it wasn't the most humble thing to say, and I think it's super important that you stay humble. But I said, well, I'm going to be fine. In 5 years, I'm going to be bigger than you guys. And I walked downstairs, and they had a good laugh at that. I'm still not bigger than them, by the way, so I was wrong. I walked downstairs, CEO walks me out to the parking lot, and he's like, man, Hayes, what you are doing with your business at Trace3 is nothing short of amazing. The way you guys started it with no money, and now are in a situation where you're really ramping and you've got 60, 70% year-over-year growth. If I was going to start over, I would so do it the way you are doing it. I so wish I could do what Trace3 is doing. And I kind of went cross-eyed. And I got back, and I shook his hand. I thanked him for flying me out. I went back, and I buckled my seatbelt, and I was like, who says that? Like, why would you say that? If you have a business that is going well, and you've got cash, and you see a better business model, why wouldn't you move to it? Why would you say, I wish that I could do it? And then you fast forward to Trace3 being 300 million, and now I totally understand what he meant. I didn't get it back then, but I totally get it now. How many of you work in companies of more than 300, 400 people? When the CEO says they're going to change something, they're going to do something, how hard is it to get 300, 400, 1,000 people to start doing something totally different than what they're used to doing? It's very, very difficult. So he said something that kind of stuck with me. If I was going to start a new company, I would do it just the way you're doing it. And I have a lot of ideas about what Trace3 should do. I have a lot of ideas. We've been slowly moving the company over the last 2 or 3 years to try to get ready for the changes that are coming in the market. So I thought, hey, I can start a new company. If it's too hard to get 300, 400 people to change, I'll start a new company. Now, what's the most important thing when you start a company? Who knows? It's the name. The name is everything, right? So I gave it some thought. I've been working on this presentation for like 15,000 hours. And I gave it a lot of thought. And you're going to have to wait for it. But here's the name I came up with. Bam! Come on, you know you like that. And you're thinking, oh, maybe it's too close to Trace3. But you're not paying attention. Look at what I did. Look at the bottom. See how the Trace3 is white and the 3 is blue? Come on. Okay, you know what? I feel like you're just clapping because I clapped. I don't think you... Forget it. If you don't like it, I'm not using it. Fine. Well, see, I didn't know you weren't going to like it, so it's still at the top of this slide. But if I was going to start a new company, in all seriousness, this is what I would do. I would focus on solutions and technologies that tie IT closer to the business. That is where we have to go. You are seeing with the cloud, all of these offerings that are coming out, we're just outsourcing our email. And we're not even a large company because I'm not in the business of doing email. I don't know how many of your businesses are in the business of doing email. But slowly, some of these things that have traditionally been IT forever are going to start to outsource. And all of IT needs to start getting focused on what services they can offer that are going to allow you to get closer to the business and be more relevant to the business. We need to have a plan to get to the cloud securely. Some of the new techs that you're going to see, they allow that, to get securely to the cloud, to encrypt your data. We need to not only be able to execute on that, but we need to do some planning. And the planning might involve sitting down and really understanding what do you want to keep, what do you not want to keep. I think big data is something that people are wanting to learn about. I don't know if everybody's ready to consume it yet, but if I was starting a new company, I would want to have some expertise in Hadoop and in Cloudera and some of these products. And I'd want to get an understanding of how you can tie all of these different pieces of disparate data together to start doing some correlation and figuring out whether you can get a better consumer experience or get more business from it. So it would start with the planning and the education on it, but you'd eventually need to actually deliver some analytics in a simple way to the clients. And I think if I started a company, I would want to do that. I also would want to deliver converged infrastructure, but not in the way that you normally think about it. Normally when you think converged infrastructure, you just think about a stack. I want to buy in a stack. That's what I want to do, and I kind of like what I was saying I did at TechFuel. You want to buy this stack, and you want to have it be clean, because that's what IT is competing with out there. Amazon and all these companies, they're building in set stacks. They're not building it 15 different ways every time they have a new app. So you want to do that. But at organizations that have a lot of people, you can't just look at the gear. You have to look at your people. Your people don't think that way. You have different silos in your organization, and they're going to fight. So I want to have a new company that is going to be able to educate your people, define an end state for where you want them to be in a year or two, and I want to be able to bring them up so that they will stop fighting, start thinking about converged infrastructure in a way that matters. And so my plan would be focus on the people, focus on the stack, but then also integrate new technologies into that that might cannibalize certain things in the stack, but that might be the right thing to do. And I want to be open to doing that. So if I was starting a new code, this is what I would do. But then I started thinking, why the hell would I start a NewCo? It's not even a good name. Like, why would I do that? I mean, really, if you think about it, like, tracing a number doesn't even make sense. I don't know why I would go with that. So we already have 1,000 clients, over 1,000 clients. I've just made a ton of investments in the last year on getting us to the next level of where we need to be. I have a team of 300 people. A real leader would step up to the challenge and not say, I wish I could do what you were doing. He would step up and say, I'm going to make this change happen because it's important to the careers of everybody that works for me and all of my clients and all my manufacturer partners that I do that. So I'm going to call the new company Trace3. And this is going to be the focus of what we're working on in the next year or two with you guys as clients and as manufacturers. And in order to do this, I had to really analyze what my offering was. I had to analyze what we'd been good at. And in order to evolve to do converged infrastructure, new tech, and human capital services, we had to really make some investments. We made a $3 million investment in Cisco. I don't know how many of you know that we do Cisco, EMC, and Symantec, but we made a $3 million investment in the last year in those products. Is it because I think they're better than everything else we're selling? At times, their solution works better. At times, other solutions work better. But what I can tell you is, it is a joke for me to stand in front of you and say that I can do a converged infrastructure stack and not have the leaders in the market in my toolbox. I've got to be able to be an expert with these products to deliver a stack that's really going to work for you. So we made a very strong investment there. I would tell you what BAMs mean, but I'm not going to. I formed a new technology group under Chad Cardenas, who you'll be hearing from today. And we spent over $1 million on this group, and I'll cover that a little bit later. But it was important to us. We realized when we took a bunch of CIOs out to Santa Barbara earlier this year, new technology is one of the main value props that Trace3 has as an organization, and we were not doing a good enough job of getting you in front of these technologies, because these are the technologies that are really going to allow you to thrive over the next couple of years. I also really believe in what I was talking about with the holistic converged infrastructure kind of an idea. Converged infrastructure isn't just about product, it is also about people. And then I did what I abhorred, right? When I went out to go visit that company that wanted to acquire us, I went out and I realized that Hayes Drumwrigt doesn't know everything. In fact, the way I had promoted before, promoting everybody from within, I had really set us up that everybody just kind of thought like me. And that didn't give me a lot of new ideas. And we went out and we found operations specialists, sales specialists. We brought people in that brought new ideas to the table because obviously we're going to be working on things that I'm not an expert in, and I had to build the team out for that. So I spent over $2 million last year on that. We also started to do something that we don't talk a ton about. We started working with Via West and with Switch on data center plans. We built out a Smart Hands organization. We now are doing small managed service plays with a NOC that we've been building. And we are getting involved in very big data center migration plans. We've done that with 5 or 6 clients, and we're really hiring and rolling that out in a big way. So those are kind of my futures of things I think you are going to need a company like mine to do. But I realized, and this is an interesting point, if you add those up, those equal $8 million. That's exactly how much money we made in 2011. I castrated the net income of Trace3 in 2012 on purpose. Because I believe that where the market is headed right now, the challenge that we have in front of us, as clients and as Trace3, I think we're side by side on this. We're in a situation where most companies like mine that just focus on reselling product in 36 months will be bankrupt. I think most IT organizations that are thinking they can bury their heads in the sand and not start thinking about how they can get closer to the business, I think most of them will be decently outsourced in the next couple of years. And I put my money where my mouth is. I spent basically, I gave us a break-even year last year just to build this out because I think that's how critical and important it is. And my job as a leader is to be providing that kind of value to all of my clients, and I am committed to doing it. But this wasn't enough. It was right about this time, I'm making all these investments, I'm doing all this, that Timothy Abbott, where's Tim? Raise your hand, Tim. Tim is a huge pain in the butt. I swear I should have him be like my chief of staff or something. Every time I'm having a huge problem, Tim walks up like he's Nostradamus and he just hands me a book. And he's like, here, Hayes, you should read this. And I'm like, well, why should I read it? He's like, you should just read it. And the book he handed me was a book called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. Have any of you read that? And what Tim was realizing was I was struggling as a leader. I had been trained to do things a certain way. I had always tried to lead by example and be out in front. And I had just made all of these investments where you just saw the investments, I had hired these VPs, I had a new layer, and I had to lead them a different way. And so Patrick Lencioni has a company called the Table Group. I don't know if any of you have ever been involved with the Table Group, but we did a 2-day offsite with them. It cost $20,000. Hopefully I'm not wrecking his pricing plan by saying that. And the first day of that offsite, what he does is he gathers all your leadership team, and he talks about this concept of having one team. And he analyzes what you are doing as leaders to help the business, but almost more importantly, what you're doing that's hurting the business. And that first day, I swear, it just felt like slitting my wrists. It was so difficult because we were going around the room and telling each other all the stuff that we did that really annoyed us. And you were having to take that feedback from 7 or 8 people. And Patrick is talking tomorrow about the Advantage, so I'm not going to, steal his thunder on a lot of what he's going to be talking about. But the second day of that meeting was the best day of my entire career. And I've had some pretty good days. The day Trace3 hit $100 million in sales after trying for 3 years to hit that number, that was a terrific day. This day was better because what he did in that meeting is that I had always thought as the CEO, my job was to hold everybody accountable to the goals and to make everything happen. And the buck stops here and I've got to be in charge and do all this stuff. But what I realized in that meeting is that if your leadership team will be accountable not only to their CEO, but more importantly to each other in an organization, that organization is going to scale, and it's going to scale like crazy. One of the things they told me was that, and I'm still not sure if this is true or not, but that every single meeting I go to, I try to turn it into a strategy meeting. If it's a tactical meeting where we just want to get stuff done, I ruin the meeting because I hate tactical stuff. It makes me crazy. Like, I can't talk about tactical stuff. Why don't you just go figure that out? Let's talk about cool strategic stuff that might happen 3 or 4 years out. But if your CEO does that to every single tactical meeting, guess what happens? Nothing ever really gets done. So I had to really look at myself, and I had to figure out that I was a big part of the problem. We now have some great tactical leaders on the team that really drive into the field the how of what needs to be done. And it's freed me up to now really work on the why. Why is Trace3 doing this? Why are we going in this direction? And that was a totally kind of an epiphany for me that, wow, if I really can trust this team to do that, we can really become something. And that was the end of it for that meeting, was really me coming out feeling that way. And here's what I'll warn you. 2 of our executives left after that meeting, which is very difficult. In fact, one of them, John Paff, who is the president of the company, I kind of want to retire his jersey. He is one of the most amazing guys. He's been at every EBC. And John is very, very close to me and very close to my heart. Trace3 would not be what we are without him. But he kind of decided after that meeting that he wants to move on and he wants to work on something else. And he wants to be a part of maybe some of the new technology companies we're working with. And that's okay. That's what you want when you have these meetings. What we are going to try to do as Trace3 and as clients in IT organizations over the next 2 or 3 years is going to be very difficult. You are going to have to change your organization in a pretty big way. That is not easy to do. You guys don't have the option to go out and start new IT organizations. You can't go start a new company to do this. You've got to figure out how to do it with the people you have. And I would recommend, if we're ever doing a large deal with your organization and you want to put the table group into that deal and so that you can get it paid for and you can have it be effective, I can't recommend it highly enough. If you've got a team that you really need to draw in and really get on the same page, I've never been at something better than that. And I'm not a big fan of those kind of offsites or those kind of consulting engagements. I think after you hear Patrick tomorrow, you'll even be more interested in it. But I would highly recommend it. So going back to the deck here, one of the things we had to do is we had to figure out why we exist. That was one of the plays in that meeting. And that's not an easy thing to do. People argue for a long time about why you exist. And in 2012, we had spent so much time working on the foundational elements of the business so that we could grow to $1 billion. It was a tough year for me, but when we wrote this, I got really excited. Because this is really what I want to do. I want to strive for greatness. I want to do something great. And I want to innovate and impact the markets that I choose to be in. I absolutely want to do that. This holds so true to what the core of Trace3 is really about. And you can argue, you're a company full of people. How much can you really innovate? I'll give you a couple of examples. So I talked a little bit about this idea of education. The education market was not a market I was dying to get into, right? How many of you have done training classes? They're not that fun, right? And usually the instructors aren't that good. So you do training, not that exciting. The only way I was going to get into that market was if I felt we could really innovate that market. And what Sandy and her team has come up with is using education as a catalyst for change. So we have this program called Scale Them that we're talking with many high-end clients about. And it is that idea that we are not going to go out there and just try to do one-off trainings with your teams, because we're in a situation in 2 or 3 years that you have to completely change the way your team works. You have all of these silos that they're working in. We need to cross-train them to stop the fighting. We need to get them closer to applications. The DevOps handoff is a nightmare. They don't know standards and ITIL. Everybody's doing it a different way. We have to go and we have to look at an end state of an organization that we would want to have in 2 or 3 years. And then we need to design a curriculum that would help us get there. And that curriculum is probably going to last 2 years, 3 years. It is not going to be short. And Trace3 can't build it by ourselves. We need massive client involvement to do that. That is what the Scale Them program is. We're trying to break down the barriers between the departments, getting everybody to work together. Why are we trying to do that? Because that is what you're competing against. And if you're competing against it and you're not operating that way, you could potentially be in trouble. This innovates the education market. That is why we're doing it. We also do on-site classes. We also do off-site classes. But those things are really all loss leaders for us to build up to the Scale Them program for your organization so that you understand you've got to set an end state. We put a project coordinator on the account for the 2 years. We put a project manager on the account. The coordinator builds the curriculum with your team, and the manager makes sure people show up. Because we understand how hard it is as an organization with limited staff to get people to show up to the classes. We'll schedule classes from 4 to 7 at night for 2 weeks, even though it's a 3-day class, just to make sure your team can show. We're in talks with very large organizations about this. This is something that I believe we should absolutely hang our hat on. As a $320 million company, I think we did about 3 or 4 million in training last year. Why would I even focus on that? Why would I care about that? I think this matters that much. If you were here last year, you might have heard Ashim Chandra talk from Greylock. Trace3 has gone out, and we have looked at new technology in a way that I don't think has been done before. Once again, an example of how we're innovating. We went out and we found all of these companies in their early stages, and we made the decision that we were going to get professional at that. We were going to take it seriously. So we went to Greylock, we went to Andreessen Horowitz, and we said, we would like to have a more formal relationship with you. You are 2 of the best venture capital firms in the world. You are coming out with some of the best products out there, no question, both on the consumer and on the enterprise side. We now go up and visit with them 3 to 4 times a year, and we see the best products they have to offer in every one of those meetings. And we took DirecTV to our last one of those. And usually we find 1 or 2 products out of the 8 or 10 we look at that we think are pretty impressive. This year we found 7. What's happening in the cloud space and the big data space is starting to get really interesting. The products are getting pretty mature. I think that this is one of the coolest things we've ever done. We have access to these products, and we have time to look at them, and we can get them to you in a way that will save you time and save you money. How many partners do you have that have relationships with these kind of firms? Mark Cranny from Andreessen Horowitz is going to be a judge for the Outlier Awards. That's how interested in our business they are. We even formed a venture capital firm called Instant Scale. I clearly like the name Scale. We formed a venture capital firm called Instant Scale where employees of Trace3 are allowed to invest in these companies when we find them. That's innovative. That's different. That's why we went into that market. You'll be hearing from a lot of these companies. But one of the key things that we're doing with the venture capital relationship is we are trying to find products that are going to get you closer to the business. In that bottom corner, Okta, SkyHigh, and CipherCloud, you'll hear from them in the speed dating. You're going to feel so much better about what your opportunity is to move to cloud SaaS providers after you hear from those products. That's why we're signing them. We're not just going out there trying to figure out, ooh, maybe this one would be a good investment, or maybe that way. We have a specific criteria that it's got to help you get closer to the business and be more valuable to the business, or we're not going to look at it. So those are 2 good examples of how we've innovated. And then this was probably my favorite thing that we came up with. Trace3 will be relevant in the post-VAR era. I like it for 2 reasons. First, 3 probably. I think it's right. How many of you, just clients in the room, think that your traditional VARs that you're buying from or you're working with will go out of business in the next 2 or 3 years if they don't change something? See a show of hands. I think they're in big trouble. So what does this do? It gives you clarity and it gives you urgency. My team now knows which hill they're supposed to take, right? We have got to change and we have got to evolve out of just being a VAR into a new type of partner for our clients, or we could be in trouble. This is kind of a bold statement. But when we wrote this one of my immediate thoughts was, out of all the CIOs I'm meeting with, this is something that they're all talking about and they're concerned with. How is their division or their department going to be relevant in the post-IT era? And I don't know how fast each of your organizations is thinking about outsourcing applications or getting to the cloud. Maybe in the next 3 to 4 years, you probably aren't giving it a ton of consideration. But in the next 10 or 15, I would bet you are, in a big way. And you're going to have some plan for it. But if I was your CEO, I think I'd be interested in this statement. I think that's what's important. When Trace3 is making these changes and you make these changes in your organization, it's not that we are going to throw out everything we are good at. We have a lot of NetApp, Riverbed, Palo Alto. We have all of these products that we are extremely good at delivering that we love. We know they're very strong. We are adding EMC and Cisco and Symantec and these other things to give you a converged stack. But it is just so important that we realize that we need to evolve and we need to get better. We need to offer more. We need to get closer to the business. So if I was a CEO, I would really want to hear that. Not necessarily that you're doing it tomorrow or you're doing it next year, but that you have some kind of plan of how it's going to work, how you're going to save the business money and have better service offerings. So I touched on it a little bit, but here's what I think the dilemma is. Our clients never really had competition like this before. And it doesn't have to be competition. They're your friends too, right? I think we make the mistake of thinking that it could be competition, it could be bad. You might want to integrate a lot of what you're doing with the cloud providers and what's happening in the open market. But there are going to be some things you want to keep internal. And I think when you keep those things internal, you're going to have to think about delivering it in an architected stack because that's what your competitors are doing. You're going to have a plan for new tech. You're going to have to leverage a service organization to fill your gaps because you are not going to get budget to hire everybody that knows everything. And you're going to have to educate and evolve your teams. Because you're going to have to do it, this is my focus. But here's my ask of you. When you purchase infrastructure from 10 different companies, what are the odds that you're going to be able to come up with an architected stack that people are going to agree on? It's going to be really difficult. My ask of you after you leave this event is for you to go back and evaluate your partners that you work with and think of whether they can deliver all of these things to you. Because if they can't deliver all these things to you, and we are at war, this new playbook's called the battle plan. I believe that we really are in a situation where we are going to war, and if we don't change in 2 or 3 years, there's going to be big trouble. And being at war gives you a lot of clarity. If you don't have partners that can do these things for you, and you have a finite amount of time to make these changes happen, then what are you doing? How are you leading that organization? What are you offering them 2 or 3 years from now? If you could define a new organization in 2 or 3 years for your company, let's say you could start a new one. If you could define a new org, and you could say, I want this to be hybrid, I want this to be private, I want to keep these apps because they're close to business, but everything else I want to get rid of. If you define that for your org in 2 or 3 years, do you think you have strong enough leaders in your business that you could change to it and do it? Would it have to be a new org, or could you do it internal? We'd like to build that plan with you. But the first thing you really have to decide, and this is what I have kind of challenged all of the Trace3 people, is who are you going to be? Are you going to trust all the training that got you to where you are? Are you going to be open, like I was in that moment of despair, that, wow, maybe I don't know everything, and maybe I do need to learn some new things, and I need to go out and check out what's in the market and be smarter about how I'm delivering services or about how I'm building my company? For me, it was a pretty simple answer. But you can't trivialize this, because if there's 300, 400, 500 people in your organization, they're all going to have different answers to this, and you're going to have to talk about it. But if you do decide that you want to be the fighter and you do want to evolve your business, then you are absolutely in the right place. For the next day and a half, this is all we're talking about. Daniel Pink is getting up after me and talking about motivation. I don't know if you guys have read his book, Drive. But when I read that, I was blown away blown away by the book because I realized I was doing so much wrong with compensation and incentives and how I was trying to get people to change. He is giving an amazing talk. We heard him in Santa Barbara at our CIO council, and he's going to get up here, and it's going to be great because he's going to have enough time to take some questions at the end. Lencioni is going to get up and talk about evolving your organization, that concept of one team, of being accountable, and then how you can make transitions, even though transitions with large orders are so difficult. Henson's going to be here. We've got all kinds of speakers that are going to be talking about the things that really matter to you guys. And I will tell you, I believe this, just by you being here, you have picked the right partner. Because we are worried about and concerned about and taking actions on the things that you might not have time to take action on. And I think that is what you want from a partner. I don't know if anyone's ever asked you this, but I got asked this at the E&Y thing. They're like, what's your unique value prop? And I was like, I don't know. I've never really given it a ton of thought. Like if I ask you, for your organization, what is your unique value prop? What makes you special? Why should I keep you? It's not the easiest thing to answer. I covered a lot of stuff, but you could say that Trace3's unique value prop is the fact that we do this, that we have these EBCs, that we get all you guys together and you can network and you can talk and you can learn about stuff that maybe in your normal day you don't have time to work on. Maybe you think our venture capital relationships are so cool and so different, and that's keeping you ahead of the curve when your team doesn't proactively have time to go out and look at this stuff. Maybe the way we've innovated the education market is something you think is a big value prop. Or delivering converged infrastructure. I did realize when I did this slide, that's a really long converged infrastructure. People should shorten that. We're going to just call it CI from now on. But delivering it in a holistic sense, that is something that makes us different. But if you were to ask me what I thought the unique value prop of Trace3 is and why we are special and why we will remain, it's because we have a willingness to evolve. And where before our tagline used to be, we listen, we deliver, we are going to step forward now that we're in a time of war and we are going to lead. We are going to step out and we are going to lead the way for you guys and go and tread a path that's going to allow you guys to follow and walk side by side with us and take advantage of all the investments that we are making in our future, which just happens to also be your future. So last year I gave a presentation, and the presentation was about what should we call ourselves, and then I never kind of followed up with that. And after writing the battle plan this year and really thinking about it, I believe that Trace3 is an evolution partner, and we're going to try to coin that. That's what we're going with instead of calling ourselves a system integrator or a VAR, because I believe that our unique value prop should be stated right up front. Our job is to help organizations evolve for the changes in the market. We plan on delivering all of these things to you. We're going to lean on new tech to start to deliver a lot of these items. But eventually, we'll have service offerings that also encompass those solutions. We will continue to evolve as is necessary. So I'll finish with one last story. How many of you guys have kids? So my oldest is 8 years old, and he's a cool little kid. And he's pretty good at soccer. And he's on I guess the fall league or whatever it is that kind of all the kids do, but it's not like a club team. And he's one of the best kids on the fall team, and he does really good, and he's getting a lot of confidence from it. And I love watching him do it because watching your kids grow in confidence is one of the coolest things I think that happens as a parent. And so after he got pretty good, and this is the sport he's kind of chosen, he kind of decided that if he wants to play later, he's going to need to start playing with the kids that are really good. So we found a club team. We go to the tryout for the club team, and he goes, and Mason's good. He's like good at soccer, and he goes to this practice, and the guys in the practice are amazing. I guess they've all been on the team for 2 years together, and Mason's out there and he's all ready, and the guy comes at him with the ball, and Mason just starts running towards him, running to right where the ball is, and the kid just uses the outside of his foot and goes right around him, and just Mason's just standing there what just happened? There is no kid in the fall league that can use the outside of their foot. I mean, he just did it, and he just ran around him, and he went and scored a goal, and I was like, oh man, maybe I misjudged this thing. And it was tough, and Mason got back in the car, and he was like, so how do these tryouts work? And I was like, well, This is a little different. Not everybody makes the team. Not everybody's going to make it. So you got to really work on everything, and you've got to try to learn all these new skills, or else there's a chance you might not make the team. And even if you try really hard and learn all the skills, you still might not make it. He goes, well, that doesn't seem fair. It's not fair at all. It's like, well, that's kind of the way it works. Hard work and practice do matter, and you have to be willing to learn new stuff. So he does his drills and he practices. Same thing happens the next tryout. It's a 4. I'd never heard of tryouts like this, but the tryout lasts all month. They have 4 different practices. And then on the third one, I was watching, and so same kid, and this really good kid, comes at him and he's kind of dribbling and he's doing all this stuff, and Mason charges at him, and then right before Mason gets to where he is, let's say he's that screen right there, he stops, and then he starts to think about where the ball's going to go, and he goes over here and he steals the ball from him. And I was like, holy moly, I can't believe he just did that, because these kids are significantly better. They've had so much more practice. And he got back in the car. I was like, Mason, that is so good. He's like, do you think I'll make the team? I was like, I don't know. But I'll tell you what you did, all by yourself, which is really cool, and I'm so proud of you. You thought about where the ball was going to be instead of just running to where it was. And by doing that, you have such a better chance of making it. And that's what I would ask of all of you. That is what we're doing. We're thinking about where the ball's going to be. That great Gretzky quote? I think my story's cooler, but the great Gretzky quote about where the puck's going to be. That's what's really mattering as this market changes. And then, as a side note, and this has nothing to do with you guys, this is just for the cameras, I eventually hope that someday my children watch this speech, because that song about being the boxer, being the fighter, I think we've all had points in our life. Forget business. We've all had points in our life where we've had despair and we've had those really tough times, and we have a choice of whether we can be a victim or whether we can rely on ourselves and rise up and overcome whatever it was that caused us to fail. So if my kids are watching this someday, this speech in particular was for you guys. I have 4 kids, and this one about not quitting and about being willing to learn new things at all times, I think this is what makes great people. So I hope you guys watched it, and I hope you liked it. Thank you.